In my last video, I asked the question, what's the problem with Oracle decks and why aren't they as popular as tarot decks? There was a lot of really good conversation in the comments. Thank you so much to everyone that participated in that discussion. I loved hearing your approach or lack of approach with Oracle decks. It was really eye-opening, and I just love finding out that sort of stuff. But what I learned was that it mostly came down to a few things. People aren't always sure what to do with Oracle decks. They feel like the guidebook is required to use Oracle decks. And the keywords can start to feel repetitive or not very expansive across an emotional range. So in this video, I want to show you how I actually use Oracle decks in my own practice. And it isn't replacing tarot, but it's more of a perspective, a source of creativity, and really a conversation with the cards and allowing the Oracle cards to do the talking. So let's get into my top 5 Oracle deck uses, and I hope you find inspiration in this. Let's get started. One of my favorite unconventional ways to use an Oracle deck is like a study guide or a study companion. Here you can see I have 2 pages from my Happy Planner, and I really love using Oracle decks as a source for information, as a source for learning. I am a forever student. I really enjoy that. So with this practice, I have basically made myself a quasi grimoire, if you want to call it that. I don't call it that, but it's just more of my creative book that I have information in, because this really fuels my deck creation and also my creative concepts. Because the more you know, the more you can apply creatively, the more you can think of concepts outside the box and like break the rules, because you know the rules, you know the information. So how I get from the cards to the page is really simple. There's 2 ways. The first way that I really enjoy using this process would to just pull a single card, and then you can dive into your materials of resources, online books, if there's a guidebook, whatever that may be. And then just start taking notes. It doesn't even have to be designed like this. You can see it's mostly notes. I do have some stickers and some little boxes I drew and whatnot, but it could really just be a plain notebook with bullet points. And those bullet points are information that you find useful. Doesn't have to be every single thing. Jot down what speaks to you. That would be my biggest piece of advice. Same with the strawberry card here. The strawberry card does have a keyword, so you could go off of that theme or concept for your note taking, or to just really get nerdy and straightforward and maybe more of that scientific angle in your note taking. So use Oracle cards as a study guide. Pull a card, take notes, learn something. Now, what if you want to incorporate this method into a tarot reading? No problem. Say you want to do a 3-card spread and you're going to incorporate Oracle deck and you want to try this study guide approach. Okay, so go ahead and pull your cards, work through your spread, and then at the end of the reading, you could go and take your notes, do your jotting down of the information, doing the study guide practice as you see fit. And it doesn't even have to relate to the tarot reading. You're just using that Oracle card as a base for note taking of that day. So for me, when I do this practice, this is the only thing I would do in the day. I will do my tarot reading, and then I'll take that one Oracle card and I'll do my 1 page of notes, and that's that. Obviously, you can do however many you like, but I just find that the most approachable and simplified version of this practice. Let's use the strawberry, for example. Here, we'll just move forward with our regular tarot reading, and we are going to use this strawberry card to be our study guide for the day to make our note page. This style of practice is really helpful for Oracle decks that don't have extra keywords. Now, the strawberry has a single keyword. and the previous Oracle deck has 3 keywords each. So that is a helping hand during the reading because you're getting some insight without needing to reference the guidebook. However, in this style of reading, this would be perfect to use an Oracle deck that doesn't have any keywords and just has a title. So imagine the strawberry card just said strawberry and not enjoy. Then it would make even more sense that after your reading, before the reading, however it feels right to you, to dive into that strawberry card and beef up your strawberry knowledge with your note page. Because I find decks that have just the title can be very challenging to incorporate into a tarot reading if you do not want to reference the guidebook. This is a perfect practice to put those guidebooks to use without being in the middle of a reading and feel like you break up your flow. Another play on this practice would to be a daily journal. You may have seen this journal a few times in my monthly wrap-ups now, but it is the perfect companion for an oracle deck because you are getting to know the oracle cards. I find that the approach of journaling, and look how short this is, it is very quick, very 2 or 3 minute practice daily. But you pull the card, think about the card, and then jot down what comes to you. Then, after I jot down what I interpret the card to be, I reference the guidebook and see how close I am or not. So, it's a great way to not only enhance your reading skills, especially if oracle decks aren't a natural fit for you. Then you almost get to test your knowledge, your intuition, your interpretation, all of that when you reference the guidebook after you work through that process. Or you could also pull a card, read the guidebook, and then journal on it. So you are getting familiar with the concepts and angle that that certain oracle deck is taking place. I do this for a monthly practice daily within that month, and then I switch to a different deck. So it's a great way just to like dip your toes in the water, get that practice in, and maybe use this chance as a moment of experimenting as well. Because at the end of the day, you aren't going to feel more comfortable with oracle cards if you don't practice, if you don't experiment, and if you don't have fun. Because that's what cements the knowledge in there. That's what you figure out what works for you and doesn't work for you. So give yourself a week, a 2 week, a month challenge of working with oracle cards and see how you like it. It's also a great chance to see if that deck is for you as well. Some are going to click, some aren't going to click as much, and some will click in this style of practice and some will click better in a different style of practice. That's why it's just so important to play around and see what works. Because at the end of the day, you can watch as many of these videos as you want, but until you start putting in the work and putting in the practice and putting in the trial and error, you won't know what's going to fit and click for you. This practice, this style of journaling has really opened a lot up for me, and I feel like it's so low pressure that everyone should try it. Get an old planner, white out the dates, and just use it for a very quick session with the cards. You'll feel good every day because you're feeling like you accomplished something. Oracle cards make the perfect companion for altar cards. I have 3 places in my studio office where I have a weekly oracle card, which these 2 work wonderfully as weeklies for me. I have a spot for a daily oracle card, and then I have a spot for monthly oracle cards. What I really love about a weekly practice is the chance to reference the guidebook and to take in the card's energy or lesson, theme, meaning, whatever, and to see how you can apply that or how that applies to your week. It's this nice little nod, this nice little reminder, and it gives you a chance to look at some beautiful artwork for the week as well. What's really great about this is that you pull it at the start of the week and you can reference the guidebook and then move on with your day. Once again, it's not interrupting the flow of any bigger tarot spread reading. You get to know the deck further and you get to use an oracle deck that maybe you wouldn't use otherwise. So for me, using an oracle deck that is very title based works for this practice because I can reference the guidebook, learn the cards, and see how that works for my week. Same with the archetypes deck. I love using these archetype cards as my North Star for the week. It's a great reminder of being. It has that very human, emotional, action based direction to it. So it feels very easily to apply to yourself. So for the weekly practice, it's really pick your own adventure. Figure out what works for you. I like something that has some meat on the bones that I can chew on for the week. That is a good reminder for 7 days. So you can see here how I take that weekly oracle card practice and I note it down in my tarot journal just so I can track it. So one a week, I'm jotting down very short phrases, very short sentence of that card, of that weekly message, and I get to move on with the week. So it's a great way to use a journal, to have a weekly practice, to use an oracle deck. This way covers multiple practice bases, if you know what I mean. Now, for my daily card pull that sits on my desk at my computer because I spend the most time there in my office, I like an oracle deck that maybe leans more affirmation based or has a phrase or something bulkier to it than just a title. Now, if the oracle deck has a title plus some keywords on there, it may work better for me, but I find having something that already has a message on there is more comfortable for me to pull daily, is more effective for me to pull daily, and just something I enjoy for an uplifting message for the day. Because, life can be hard and we don't always want something that's like beating us over the head daily that feels heavy to encounter. So having something a bit more fluffy, something a bit more soft, gentle. So these two work great for a daily pull. Okay, so how about oracle cards in a tarot spread? We talked about some more action based practices. But what about just in practical reading terms? Like I mentioned before, I am more of a free flow, narrative based storytelling reader. I like the cards to guide and direct me. Not that I don't have questions, but I allow the oracle card to do the talking. So let's take a 3-card spread, for example. I would first lay down the oracle card in the center. Now, once again, an oracle deck that has a phrase, a strong keyword, and then even some extra keywords underneath is going to make it easier to interpret and to include into your tarot card reading because you don't have to start and stop and reference the guidebook, which once again, I recognize that is a holdup for many people with oracle cards. So something like this is going to be easier to get into and to keep the flow moving in your reading. The oracle card in the center for me acts as the foundation, acts as the anchor, acts as that emotional undercurrent to the tarot cards. And then this story, the narrative, the archetypes, the lessons of the tarot card feed into, play off of, and move with the oracle card. So it's almost like addition, right? We're going high priestess plus inspired, inspiration, breakthrough, creativity, right? And then we can come over here to the Ace of Wands and we go Ace of Wands plus inspiration, breakthrough, creativity. And then you could go High Priestess plus Ace of Wands brings you here's solution. So it's just the way you want to play around with this. Now, if you are a spread based reader, if you are a question, question type reader. Oracle cards that have these extra keywords are going to get you further with that question than using an Oracle card that has one keyword on it or a title. Because unless you aren't pulling from the artwork to craft the message from that, because you don't want to reference the guidebook, it is going to feel like you're stuck. So it comes down to also setting yourself up for success with Oracle cards. And it goes back to just playing with them and seeing what is right and what works for you. Because here, I would just read these three together and say, it is time to tap into that intuition and to allow your creativity to drive your passions. That's how I would read these three together versus a set spread. But let's look at the example of a set spread. Say we want to do a good old 2-card spread, and this is start and this is stop. Once again, selecting an Oracle deck that is going to set you up for success. This Oracle deck has phrases on it, which once again, I think is easier to push you in a direction for your message. The Emperor is inviting us to start expanding, and this Oracle card is telling us to stop staying in your head, get out of your head in order to start. So instead of this Oracle card that has this really great phrase, let's just use this card for an example of how this might be tough. If you don't know what borage means, then it's going to be really difficult to get the message of what to stop. You could totally start diving in and picking apart the artwork, but I feel like that also is a bit of a stopping point for people with Oracle decks as well. Because the beauty of tarot is that the story of each card is built into the card, even if you want to ignore the artwork. But Oracle relies on what that title, what that keyword, what that phrase is, plus the artwork to really enhance that. So this is where I find those title type cards really tough. So once again, set yourself up for success with a style of Oracle card that is going to have a smooth transition for your reading for you. The last example I'll provide, and obviously there's endless ways to play and experiment, and I feel like I definitely need to experiment more with Oracle cards and really see how far I can push them. But to keep things simple for just this video's sake, the last example I will talk about is using Oracle decks or affirmation decks, whatever is a non-tarot or non-card system, as spread maker. So for this mini deck, for example, we have a large keyword and then we have a small phrase underneath. So we could use this to our advantage to craft a spread. So let's use transform, for example. We'll use this as our first position. Clearing will be our second position, and resilient will be our third position. And then allow the phrases to craft your question. What area in my life needs transformation? For clearing, we have make room for growth. How can I clear space to transform? And third, we have resilient, stay strong as evergreen trees. Where can I stay resilient through this process? How can I stay resilient through this process? So let's lay some tarot cards with it. Great. So now we can have our tarot spread reading. We are still incorporating Oracle cards into the reading, into the practice, without necessarily having them be a big part of the spread, especially if you are super comfortable and prefer reading with tarot cards. I find that using Oracle cards in the spread maker way actually feels really creative and engaging and involved because you are a part of this crafting of the narrative and the questions versus just coming to the cards, whether with a set spread or that set question in your mind. There's a bit more play, creativity, experimenting with this, a bit more control in a way as well, where you get to decide where the question goes, but you have a starting point. You're not having to recreate the wheel, right? Like, I don't know, there's something that like feels controlling but open at the same time about this that just works in my mind. So, for like our area of transformation here, we have the Ace of Cups. So, this is a really clear message here of, your area of emotions, opening up, being more receptive of other people's feelings, recognizing your own feelings, recognizing your downfall of your feelings, and how to transform that. We have the Hermit with clearing. Well, we got to get out of our own head. We got to get out of our own way. We have to engage with others to open up those emotions. Working on your emotions takes a relationship with yourself and with others. So it's not a solo, isolated journey. While part of it can be opening yourself up with that transformation with others, is going to be a part of the process. And then areas we will need resilience, or how can we be resilient? We have the Wheel of Fortune, which I think is just a great reminder that the seasons continue to turn, to change. And so does life, so do your emotions. To ride that wheel of emotions is a part of the transformation, remaining balanced in that, acknowledging that, and accepting that there's going to be highs and lows in that cycle, and to remain resilient. So, I hope that these handful of examples were helpful. These were just my top 5 quick practice examples with oracle cards. Let's get a good discussion going again, like the last video. I really love hearing everyone's takes, their styles, their uses, their ways. It really helps us all learn. And sharing ideas is the whole beauty of being here on YouTube as well. It's a place to learn and it's a place to explore. So I hope you come to this with an open mind and an open discussion. And I would love to hear more from you. If you haven't checked out my last video about oracle cards, I'll leave the link below in the description box. So make sure to give that a watch if you are curious. And until next time, I will catch you on the next video. Bye.